A big thank you to Jero for sponsoring today's video on Patreon. Mondrak vs Beirut, Anowon and Mizzix. A 3-lander with some ramp is good. Yeah, I'm not doing much else other than that, but I mean, worst case scenario, we could always go for our commander and the card advantage with this. It's slow, but I'll try it. We're just not going to draw into any lands if I mulligan. That's always what happens on Modo. Turn 1 mana crypt from the Dimir player. And that takes him into a Vorpal Sword. We'll have to be careful of that one. Mosswarp Bridge from the mono green player. And there is a Cathar Commando for us, so get into a little bit of removal. It's a Plains into the Wayfarer's Bauble, and likely just cracking that next turn. Thrumming Bird for Mizzix. Then it's Demonic Tutor for Anowon. Then Castle Garenbrig for the green player. We see what we draw into here first. Okay, and Enlightened Tutor might get us into some fast mana. That's probably what we go for, depending on what our opponents do. Let's go Wayfarer's Bauble first. Mizzix playing Reckoner Bankbuster now. And then the Throwing Bird going in towards the Dimir player. So once Throwing Bird connects, they get to proliferate and putting another counter onto the Bankbuster. Rhystic Study from Anowon, likely what they tutored for. I'm curious that they didn't tap down their mana crypt for that. Obviously showing us that they don't have any interaction to play during any of our turns. Alright, and annoyingly the green player passed through his turn really quickly there. Not any fault of his own, it's just that I thought I was F6ing through his turn. I was actually going through my own there, so ended up skipping through my main phase where I was going to Enlightened Tutor and all the way to the second main. At least we actually get a turn here. So get down the Cavern of Souls, naming Phyrexian, and yeah, don't think I'm particularly bothered about getting down the commander yet. It's probably best to just go for Cathar Commando, and then we can Enlightened Tutor at the end of someone's turn. That's likely what we're doing here, so yeah, maybe Cathar Commando, blow up the Rhystic Study. Alright, really glad I didn't get down the Sol Ring now, because Dack Fayden comes straight into play, and correctly paying into the Rhystic Study. So taking down the Dack Fayden, gaining control of the Mana Crypt. Then it is the Reckoner Bankbuster being tapped and drawing a card. So I'm assuming that the Throwing Bird is going to swing in here. That means the Cathar Commando can likely take out the Dack Fayden. So hitting with the Thrumming Bird again, and going to proliferate more counters over these things. Anowon the Ruin Thief into play. So we'll see if the green player can get rid of Rhystic Study before we decide if we're going to do that. Okay, apparently not. The Skyshroud Claim just playing straight into the Rhystic Study, so getting a card from there. Might get down some untapped lands and still go for the removal on that, so we'll continue to wait before we go for the Commando. But not doing anything there, so it is Cathar Commando for us. And what are we going to do next turn? We can drop a land into Sol Ring, pay the tax, then that will leave us with 5 mana. And with that we can play the Mondrak and pay for it maybe. So we'll say yes to the Rhystic Study here, just so that they're not as likely to have any counter magic for the Enlightened Tutor. Although we'll play Enlightened Tutor and draw them a card anyway. So if we can keep our Mondrak in play, I'm going to say it's more likely that we'll blow up the Rhystic Study with the Cathar Commando. They've already drawn 2 cards from it. So we grab ourselves a Sol Ring to keep up on mana. And then that's what we draw into this turn, so throw out the Nykthos. And we'll go straight through to combat, just in case someone can do something against this Cathar Commando. I'm not expecting anyone to get rid of it, and I am expecting to destroy the Dack Fayden here. So I'm managing to have Dack Fayden hit the bin, cast ourselves the Sol Ring, and we can pay for the Study. And then it is our commander, and we can pay for the Rhystic Study again, which takes us off the mana for Cathar Commando, annoyingly. So it might have been worth just giving them one more card there so that we can blow this thing up. But if we can keep our Cathar Commando in play and maybe equip a sword to it, then it might be more use to us, especially if someone does manage to get rid of the Rhystic Study. Mizzix of the Ismagnus being played now. Yeah, and they were allowed to draw another card with the Rhystic Study there, so what's that? 4 cards they've got with that thing? Ugh, and then a Tezzeret's Gambit as well, so it's going to be another card from the Study. Getting their first experience counter with the Mizzix though. So they'll proliferate another one with the Tezzeret's Gambit and then another one with the Thrumming Bird, so their instants and sorceries are going to cost 3 less at the end of this turn. Anowon being hit by the bird again. Anowon turning in sideways at Beirut. Quite likely to mill some creatures against the green player, so 2 damage dealt from the Anowon. They will mill 2 here, managing to get a Worm Coil Engine and a basic. So Anowon drawing another card there. Then it is Enigma Thief, which can be paid for the Prowl cost. Okay, so with the Enigma Sphinx, it's for each opponent. A non-land permanent can get bounced. It looks like they're just targeting the Mana Crypt here, so playing nice with us, which I'm grateful for. I was wondering if we could maybe drop a land next turn, crack this, and then put X into White Sun's Zenith, 5 into the White Sun's Twilight. That will blow up all the creatures on board, but yeah, we'll leave them alone if they're going to play nice with us. 6 mana being generated by the Castle Garenbrig. So we see a Dirt Cal Worm, and see if they pay the Rhystic Study tax here. Yeah, it looks like they are paying it, that's good. Okay, to Cassia's Welcome, if we can actually get into some creatures at some point, that would be nice. I think it might just have to be the Sword of Forge and Frontier, and I'm basically just trying to get lands off the top of our library with that. Pay for the tax, I'll put the sword onto the Mondrak, and I'm going to swing in through to the Mizzix player here. We do have to deal damage to a player. So we'll go in over at the Mizzix player. 6 cards in hand over there, and I'm positive that they're going to have instants and sorceries they can abuse. Ideally we'll have 2 lands on the top here, but not likely. It is at least 6 commander damage to our opponent though, and if we don't get into any lands, we did clear 2 cards off the top that we likely don't want anyway. Alright, there's one, a Plains, and Defiler of Faith is good. Actually a token generator, but we needed to be getting into the lands ultimately. So drop the Plains. That puts the first counter on the Worm. And then I'm just going to pass through to the Izzet player's turn. If they show consistently that they're paying into the Rhystic Study, then I'll let them do that. But otherwise, we're going to have to go for the Cathar Commando onto Rhystic Study, because the Dimir player did play nice with us. Okay, Arcane Signet should definitely be paid for. Yeah, not paying for it. Are we going to go down a creature to get rid of the Rhystic Study for everyone though? Excellent. So, drawing our opponent a card and then just deciding to quit on us for some reason. It's noteworthy as well that, yeah, if our opponent gets into a land here, he can afford the ability on the Vorpal Sword, so we need to watch out for that next turn. And our opponent did of course drop a land, another plus counter on the Worm. Then we see Bitter Blossom for the Rogue player. Then a Mind Stone, going down to 6 cards in hand. Didn't tap down the Mana Crypt in order to play the Mind Stone, so wasting coloured mana there. Dungeon Geist has been discarded at some point as well, so maybe that's to hand size. Could have had the Vorpal Sword equipped here. The 6/6 hitting the Worm player again. Feels as though he's more likely to hit creatures there, which is probably right. We've got a fair number of creatures here, but I imagine the Worm player has more. Milling there, and Arcane Signet, Unnatural Growth, a creature in Plated Slagworm, Mind Stone, and an Elvish Mystic. Then we see a Surge Engine from the Rogue player. Yeah, seems very reluctant to tap that Mana Crypt mana for some reason. Berry Worm Speaker being cast, and paying into the Rhystic Study there. So I'm less worried about it now that the Izzet player has gone down. Now there's a 7/4 with Trample in play thanks to the buffs, so we'll see if the Anowon is going to take a big hit. Yep, going in over there as revenge. Alright, so we start our turn. There is an Hour of Reckoning. Yeah, I think we need to swing in and try and make use of this Sword of Forge and Frontier. So we're going in towards the green player here, because obviously we've got pro-green. We'll just have to hope that there's no Nature's Claim or anything. So Sword of Forge and Frontier will trigger once we've hit our opponent for 6 points of commander. And there we see an Anointed Procession and an Increasing Devotion. They're tempting. Amazing how many lands we're not getting into though. Definitely play the Anointed Procession, I think. Now we can not pay the Rhystic Study here, and that will leave us with 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 mana. So we can have our opponent draw 2 cards to Rhystic Study and get down Anointed Procession and the Increasing Devotion. Or we can pay the tax and hold up the Rootborn Defences, or play to Cassia's Welcome. I think we pay into the Rhystic Study here is the wise move. And yeah, losing 2 token generators, unfortunately. It would be good if this thing just let you cast the exiled cards as long as you've attacked with a creature equipped with this sword. I think that would be better as opposed to losing the things forever. So there's still a hoop to jump through with that caveat, but you don't just lose the cards forever. It's not particularly good in the early game, this thing, unless you can actually get into lands with it. I think that was the idea of the balance for it. You can either get into the lands in the early game or get into spells in the late game, but you have little to no control over that, really. The first Bitter Blossom trigger is made, and then we see a land from our opponent. That is a Survivor's Encampment. And then we see a Hero's Downfall from our opponent, so that will force us, let's see here, could go after the Vorpal Sword, but yeah, just have to pray that we don't see them equip Vorpal Sword, I suppose. They can't equip the sword and then activate it this turn. That would take 10 mana, including 5 black pips, so let's blow up the Rhystic Study in response to this. Might as well tap down for Devotion, because we're not going to be able to do anything after we do this. And obviously in hindsight that makes me wish that I got down the Cassia's Welcome, but we didn't know what our opponent was going to be doing, and we did force them to use a Heroic Downfall here. Then we see a Vengeful Reaper, which isn't a rogue, it is a Flying Haster though, and a Shakedown Heavy. So they've gone back down to 3 cards, and their card draw's gone thanks to Rhystic Study. So I imagine we take a hit at this point. But looking to dump 5 mana into X on White Sun Zenith next turn and actually make some tokens. Not attacking us here, just going with the Enigma Thief at the mono green player again. And there we see a bunch of lands cleared off the top and a Herald's Horn, as well as a Temple of the False God. That was actually a favour that they've done for the green player there, because yeah, that's a hell of a lot of lands they just cleared off. Now seeing Bellowing Tangleworms, so that is Intimidate, and they can block with this artifact. We can't block anything, obviously. And we are at the highest life total, so surprised that no one's swinging in at us yet. That might change this turn. Activating the commander as well, so making what will be a 6/6 worm with Trample. And it has Intimidate as well, of course. 6 cards left in hand for our opponent and starting to go off this turn. Now activating the Mosswalk Bridge now that they've got the 10 power in play. Not sure if they had the mana held up. I think they could have done that during our opponent's turn. Not sure though. Palaka Worm comes down and gains 7 life. I think it draws a card. Yeah, draws a card when it dies. But at the moment, a 9/9 Trample Intimidate. So definitely looking to wipe the board, I reckon. And still going in at the rogue player. I mean, half tempted to just leave these two to hit each other back and forth after a board wipe. I imagine we'll be looking like public enemy number 1, but should buy us a decent amount of time. Okay, there is a Spawning Pit, so that's a means of making more tokens for us if we have to kill off all our own tokens to a board wipe at some point. But obviously I've made very few tokens in this deck somehow. Go through to attack, see what we get off the top with this sword. And that's obviously going to be 6 points of commander damage, so putting our opponent on 12 points here. So knocking our opponent down to 21, the rogue player down to 16, and we're still sitting high at 39 over here. So we see a land and a Keeper of the Accord as well. Is tempting. How many lands do our opponent have? Our opponents have 5, 6 and 7 lands. That is 2, 4, 6 and 7 as well. And we'll actually be on 7 after dropping this land also. So yeah, don't look to game from the Keeper of the Accord. And yeah, we could pass through the turn and start making tokens, but against Trample and Intimidate doesn't really help us. So I think we are still on the board wipe plan. And we're 1 mana shy of the Rootborn defences here, annoyingly. Otherwise we could save our commander. But yeah, we can go to Cassia's Welcome. Yeah, so we'll just have to go for the White Sun Zenith, I think. It's a shame that we have to lose our commander, but total lack of tokens somehow in this deck. So I'll just go for 5, double check that it is 5. Yeah, if X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures, and we can get down the Spawning Pit at the end of this turn as well. Asking me to apply replacement effects here, so I don't think it particularly matters which we put on the stack, they're both worded the same. So managing to wipe the board, and that is 10 toxic creatures that are in play, each with toxic 1, so we could one-shot each of our opponents as it stands now. The Palaka Worm dies and draws our opponent a card. Yeah, it's not our intention to get our opponents with toxic, but obviously we're seeing that we can do here. Our commander goes back into the command zone, and then we'll just end the turn with a Spawning Pit. With the Spawning Pit we can sacrifice everything to a board wipe, and we'll make a lot of tokens with that because every 2 counters and 1 mana that we put into it will be 2 2/2 spawns, and they will be able to block. But they obviously don't have Toxic Wand, so it is a Bitter Blossom from our opponent. I'm thinking at the moment that we try and take out the Dimir player while he's fairly low on cards. Getting another chump blocker into play in Invisible Stalker. Vorpal Sword finally being equipped onto the Invisible Stalker. So even if they've got haste here, it doesn't matter, they don't have enough mana to activate it. Yeah, they're still not tapping down this mana crypt for some reason. They just put a blue mana into the Grim Tutor. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of anything that they can do with that mana now. Could get into a Swiftfoot Boots, but we're going wide on them next turn. If they had a Grim Tutor, you'd think that they just go for a board wipe there. Maybe they don't have one. And I'm not expecting the green player to do too much to us here. Could have an Artifact Wrath, Oblivion Stone, something like that. But thanks to the Dimir player playing out creatures there, we're going to have to commit more to the red zone and the Dimir player's side, especially after that Grim Tutor, a Ravenous Lindworm. And that does of course mean that our opponent is going to survive another turn after this, I imagine. Rampant Growth from our opponent after that. Okay, and we get into a land off the top, fancy that. So, yeah, I think we just go straight through to combat here. So we go 10 into the Dimir player, and then a couple more into the Dimir player to make up for the blocks. And yeah, should have gone for the Sword of Forging Frontier actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So these 2 into the left, these 10 in at the left as well, and the rest at our opponent. Yeah, definitely should have equipped the sword here. But we're still looking at going wide on our opponent next turn anyway, so I don't think it really matters. And our opponent blocks with the worm. No blocks made by the Dimir player, so we'll sacrifice the creature that's being blocked to the spawning pit because it's going to die anyway. Might as well put a counter on there. And there we go, our opponent goes down to 12 points of poison damage thanks to no blocks. And yeah, White Sun's Twilight doing some work for us here. I think it was more the 2 double token effects that really helped us get down our commander again. And then it is a Plains. And I think we're fine to dump the Tacasia's Welcome into play here. Apparently this is pronounced Tacasia, someone told me the other day, so yeah, never heard that name before, but never know how to pronounce anything in Magic. Yeah, pass the turn at that, holding up the spawning pit. See if our opponent can take out artifacts. The mono green player's on 7 poison damage, by the way. And yep, just decided to scoop. It wasn't likely that they were going to do anything there in a mono green deck. Alright, and just to rub salt in the wound, finally get into a token generator in Reverent Hoplite. Now, a Devotion to White wasn't all that great there, but it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so that obviously would have been doubled twice. So we would have had another 20 soldier tokens there. Yeah, not the best showing of Mondrak, but got to see a really good showing with the White Sun's Twilight. This is more of a White Sun's Twilight game than a Mondrak game, but I'll try and get another game in with Mondrak now and try to do better with that. Hopefully you all enjoyed it regardless, and I will see you all in the next one. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.